You know that kid in school who never studied and still got the highest grade? The one teachers loved. The one parents pointed at during family dinners while saying, "Why can't you be more like them?" Maybe that kid was in your class. Maybe you watched them finish tests early while everyone else was still flipping pages. Or maybe, and this is where it gets interesting, that kid was you breezed through early school like it was a warm-up level in a video game. Homework took 10 minutes. Teachers explained things once and it just clicked. Adults called you gifted, brilliant, or ahead of your age. At the time, it felt amazing. Being the smart kid meant praise, attention, and the quiet assumption that life would probably be easier for you than everyone else. But then something strange happened. A few years passed, and suddenly things got harder. Not just school, but motivation itself. You started procrastinating. Big projects felt weirdly overwhelming. You might begin things with excitement but abandon them halfway through. And the most confusing part, people still expected you to succeed effortlessly. After all, you were the smart one. So why do so many gifted kids grow up feeling burnt out, anxious, or stuck? Why do people who once seemed destined for easy success struggle with perfectionism, procrastination, or self-doubt later in life? There's actually a hidden psychology behind this pattern. Once you see it, a lot of confusing parts of adulthood suddenly start to make sense. One path begins with what you might call the effortless achiever. Picture a child sitting in class while everyone else struggles through a worksheet. The teacher explains a concept once, and somehow the child already understands it. While other students are still thinking, they've already finished. Sometimes they're even bored, waiting for everyone else to catch up. Naturally, teachers praise them. "Wow, you're so smart. You're gifted. You're naturally talented." At first, this seems harmless, even positive. But over time, those words shape how the child understands success. Instead of learning that achievement comes from effort, they learn something else, that smart people succeed easily. Years later, when they encounter something genuinely difficult, the experience feels unsettling. A challenging subject, a demanding job, or a long project suddenly requires real effort. And because they were never used to struggling, the difficulty feels personal. Instead of thinking, "This is hard," their mind whispers something more frightening. "Maybe I'm not actually smart." To protect that identity, they begin avoiding situations where failure is possible. They procrastinate. They switch goals. They quietly step away from challenges that threaten the image they've carried for years. Not because they lack ability, but because struggling feels like losing the very thing that once defined them. Then there's another pattern, the perfectionist performer. This person also did extremely well growing up, but their experience was shaped by constant recognition. Teachers praised their work. Parents celebrated their achievements. Family members proudly talked about them to friends. Success became more than something they enjoyed. It became something people expected. At first, that expectation can feel motivating, but gradually it turns into pressure. Every new task carries an invisible question. What if this time I'm not as impressive as everyone believes? That quiet fear follows them into adulthood. They have ideas, ambitions, and big plans. Maybe they dream of writing a book, launching a project, or building something meaningful. But before they even begin, doubt creeps in. What if it isn't perfect? What if people see my limitations? So they prepare more, they research longer, they keep adjusting the plan. Weeks turn into months while they polish and refine, waiting for the perfect moment to start. Ironically, perfectionism often prevents the very achievements it's trying to protect. The fear of producing imperfect work becomes stronger than the desire to finish anything at all. Another common path is the chronic procrastinator. This person also grew up labeled as gifted, but school never demanded much effort from them. Assignments could be completed the night before. Tests could be passed without studying. Deadlines felt flexible because the results were always good. Over time, their brain learned a simple rule: I work best under pressure. And in school, that strategy works surprisingly well. But adulthood runs on a different system. Real-world goals stretch across months or even years. Careers require consistent effort rather than last-minute bursts of energy. Personal projects demand patience and structure. Suddenly, the old method stops working, tasks pile up, motivation disappears. The same person who once finished assignments effortlessly now feels overwhelmed by responsibilities that seem endless. It's not a lack of intelligence, it's the absence of habits that others slowly developed through years of trial and error. Then there's a deeper struggle many former gifted kids face: the loss of identity. When someone spends their childhood being known as the smart one, that label slowly becomes part of how they see themselves. Teachers expect great things from them. Family members talk about their future achievements. People describe them as someone with enormous potential. But potential is a strange compliment. It always points to the future. It says that something extraordinary is waiting ahead. When someone hears that message for years, they begin imagining a future version of themselves who accomplishes something remarkable. The person who writes the groundbreaking book, builds the innovative company, or changes the world in some big way. Real life rarely unfolds that dramatically. Careers grow slowly, dreams change shape, people discover new interests and priorities. And when reality looks smaller or quieter than the grand future others once predicted, many former gifted kids feel like they've somehow disappointed everyone, including themselves, even when they're doing perfectly well. This creates a quiet kind of burnout. Not the kind that comes from working too hard, but the kind that comes from feeling like you're constantly falling short of a version of yourself that only ever existed in expectations. The surprising truth behind gifted kid burnout is that intelligence was never the real problem. The problem was the story built around it. When children are praised mainly for being naturally smart, they often miss out on learning something much more important: how to struggle, how to fail safely, and how to keep going when progress is slow. Ironically, the people who thrive long-term aren't always the ones who started ahead. They're the ones who learned how to deal with difficulty. They built patience, resilience, and discipline step by step. Those qualities matter far more in adulthood than early intelligence alone. The good news is that those skills can still be learned. They aren't locked in childhood. Anyone can develop them later in life. It might feel uncomfortable at first, like learning to walk in unfamiliar shoes, but growth doesn't have an expiration date. So if you were once called gifted but now feel stuck, unmotivated, or unsure about your direction, it doesn't mean you failed. It might simply mean you're learning lessons you never had to learn before. Your story didn't end when school stopped being easy. In many ways, that was just the beginning of a different kind of learning. Now think about your own experience. Did any of these patterns sound familiar? The effortless achiever who struggled when things stopped being easy, the perfectionist who hesitates to finish anything imperfect, the procrastinator who relied on last-minute bursts of effort, or the person quietly carrying the weight of potential? Maybe one of them felt uncomfortably accurate. Maybe several did. Either way, recognizing the pattern is powerful. Once you see it clearly, it stops controlling you from the background. And that awareness is often the first step toward building a healthier, more realistic relationship with your abilities and with yourself. If you like this video, make sure to like the video. Also, subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon so you don't miss any update. Also, share it with your friends.